Good morning. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Great to see you. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I got there in the end, running around just a little bit. All right, let's see who's here. Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. If you remember, last night I ran a Valentine's show in the evening in a coffee time spot at 7 p.m. So we didn't have coffee time during the day yesterday, and it makes it hard to realize that this is now Tuesday because we're running our morning show. Great to see everybody. Mom, good morning in sunny Granby. Beautiful sunny day here, but ice cold, dangerously cold. Oh, it's super... It's like that Facebook meme, why do I live somewhere where the air hurts my face? It's like that extreme right now. Linda, good to see you in New Jersey. Robin, good to see you in Kirsten. Good morning. I have to listen to your messages. Haven't gotten back to the phone yet. Crystal, -20 wind chill. Okay, so that's much worse. That's much worse. Oh man, that is rough. Long Johns are working hard today. Working overtime, huh? Oh man. Doreen, great to see you. And Cheryl, great to see you in sunny Maine. The winter sun, it is a nice thing, isn't it? Even though it's terribly cold, that winter sun really keeps us going. We need that. What is it? Is it vitamin D for the sun? Man, I should know that. I have to ask the kids. Beverly, great to see you. I'm catching up with your comments. I'm sorry I kept you waiting. I was fooling around. I had to make coffee desperately. Let's see. Cheryl and Beverly, Mom, Chrissy, good morning. I enjoyed cocktail night too. It was a fun episode. If you missed it, I hope you watch back on it. We were looking at, where is it? This book by Donna Harkman, Shades, Tints, Tones, and Values. We looked at this book. It just came out. I just got it in the mail with the Rug Cooking Magazine Book Club. And that's what we were looking at last night on Cocktail Time for Valentine's Day, Galentine's Day's special episode. And that was a fun episode. It was a long one, but it was great looking at that monochromatic work. Really, really fun. Good way to wind it down, right? Last night. Linda, Beverly, Caroline, good to see everybody. Oh, let me just catch up a little bit. Becky, good to see you. Oh, Crystal, how cute. Oh, Linda, good to see you in Edmonton, Alberta. Great to see you. I am doing well. I am doing well. I'm always in such a rush. I hate it. This is the time of the morning that I really look forward to because even though I have to leave all my projects over there on the table and I've got to get back to orders and getting some stuff done, I got another chapter in for my book deadlines yesterday. That was harrowing. So even though everything is sitting right there in view, I'm right here, and this is our time to chat and catch up and have grown-up time and talk about things that we both really like, that we all really like. So this is a nice time of day for me. I really look forward to this. Barbara, great to see you. Dave, great to see you. Cocktail night was really fun. Oh, I'm glad you caught it later. It's fun to do things at different times because we catch different people who are available. Martha, great to see you. So, you know, I was looking back on things. I know I have a bunch of announcements and stuff. We'll have to wait till tomorrow. I didn't get that sort of synthesized before running the show today. But what I did figure out is that fourth book in the giveaway series, working with Rug Cooking Magazine. Remember, they've given away Hooked Rug Portraits, Hooked on Words, and Designed by You by Tamara Pavic. Those 3 books so far that were especially chosen. I was working with Erin at Rug Cooking Magazine because they're such inspiring books. Those 3 giveaways are past, and the last one coming up, I had to look it up in my emails, I realized was a second book, the other book by Tamara Pavic called Rug Cooking Journeys. So because we just did a Tamara book recently, we're still going to run this and we're still going to give away 3 copies of it. But I thought, let's start this on Monday because we have a few things going on this week. Yesterday we already did our Galentine's. Today I'm picking up with the applique and the idea of wool applique and all kinds of applique crossover possibilities and potential for rug hooking projects and rug making projects. And on Friday we have bingo night coming up. So I just posted that. I should have put the link here. I just posted that on the Facebook group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, and it's up on Ribbon Candy Hooking. So this coming Friday night, which I believe is the 18th, yep, the 18th, Friday the 18th, will be a rug hooking bingo night. We are overdue, and the theme is spring. It's got to be, right? It's got to be spring. Kara put together a beautiful collection of rugs, and we do the abbreviated game with the 16 squares, a 4x4 card. So if you haven't played before, it's a rug hooking bingo night on Friday, which means you can go to Ribbon Candy Hooking for the link or the Facebook group for the link. I'll post it in this video as soon as I'm finished with the live show. And you can buy cards for $3 each. And we pool that money. There are 12 different cards, so you can buy as many as you think that you can manage, because it is actually bingo, where I make a call and I show a picture of a rug, and I say who it's by and who made it and some special things about the rug. And if you have that on one of your cards, you cross it off. And you're looking for traditional bingo, like, no, sorry, I take it back. We're looking for blackout bingo. We're looking for the whole card to be crossed off. And I think we will play, because it worked out so well last time, some small mini games within the game. Like, for example, maybe I'll say something like the first person to get all 4 corners and shout it out. But typically, you know, we play maybe 2 or 3 mini games, but we pool the money. We take the money out for the mini games, maybe 10 each kind of thing. And then at the end of the night, we figure out how many people had the winning card. And the winnings minus the mini games get divided by those people, and that is a gift certificate to the Ribbon Candy Hooking Store, because we can't obviously play with cash. That would be completely illegal. But you can pick up backings or wool, plain wool, dyed wool, supplies, kits, patterns, anything at all. And if you're not seeing what you want, you can write to me, because I have everything. It's just a question of getting it all on the internet. And how much time that takes. So, Nancy, good to see you. I just sent you an email. See if you can check and get back to me. I just want to confirm. So that'll be fun, bingo night. So that's coming up on Friday. So the point is, why don't we start this book on Monday? We'll start talking about it on Monday. I'll probably do a video. I think I'll do a video today, and I'll get it up there so you can start putting comments on it. So I'll direct you to that video tomorrow for coffee time on the Wednesday episode, and you can start putting up comments. And then we'll start looking at this book on Monday, and we'll do the draw for it the following Monday. So this will be the 4th in the series, the second Tamara Pavich book. Very, very good choice. We already did this one and had the giveaway for this one, and those books, I sent the winning names into Rug Cooking Magazine, so Erin has those. Those will be going out, and this will be the one that is upcoming. That is the last in the series of giveaways. So I thought, why don't we do that, and make sure that you get your bingo cards, because you want to have them printed by Friday night at 7 p.m. when we start running bingo. It's a very fun night. So I thought today, let's go back to what we were talking about. I've really been enjoying talking and looking at some of these applique projects and books. And what got me started, I want to finish this one out, because we've been sort of lingering with this, constant interruptions, right, with other projects and stuff. Textiles Transformed by Mandy Pattullo. She's got 2 books out. I ordered the second one as well, so we'll look at that in the future. But I just love her work as a textile artist, and I'm seeing so many possibilities, crossovers. And I know a lot of you already do wool applique, do penny rugs, do quilting, do a lot of other textile art that isn't, you know, straight on rug hooking or punch. So I know a lot of you are already aware of this, but for those of us who aren't used to doing these kinds of mashups of different techniques, it's really interesting to look at a book where there is so much variety. So let's pick up where we left off. We were looking at some of the really cool projects in this book. And the next one I want to show you, I'm going to share my screen with you. Hey, Lisa. I'm going to share my screen with you and come down to, where is it? Sailor. Here he is. This project. If you can see close up, this is an embroidery project, and this is really cool. At the end of Mandy's book, and the link should be in the description to this video, in the end of Mandy's book, she talks about different people who do different kinds of work. And this toward the end of the book, this chapter is called Sailor's Wool Work. So for example, this piece is by Colin Millington, and it's called The Lost Whale. It's wool and synthetic wool on calico. So this is an embroidery piece done in wool on wool calico. Colin Millington, born in 1936, is a retired sailor who lives in Sheringham in Norfolk. He makes wool works inspired by 19th century woolies, while bringing a bit of his own individual style into each project. Now, this is a British book, right? So I'm not exactly sure what the term woolies refers to. I wonder if it's like embroidered piece, or maybe you know and you'll let me know. He initially started with copying old pictures, but is now confident at coming up with his own designs. And he's developed a visual language which is unique while referencing the past. Perspective and scale might not be quite accurate, but this adds to the charm. Millington works with 2-ply wool, often sourced from charity shops, on calico that he attaches to stretchers, meaning like stretchers like for a painting, right? Those wooden things that kind of click together or staple together. He mostly uses long and short filling stitch, but like the original sailor stitchers, he sometimes resorts to other stitches such as chain stitch or back stitch for linear effects. He is represented by Paffron and Scott, and their website is called Paffron, Paffron, and Scott.co.uk. I thought this was just a very cool composition that had that real strong folk art feel. On both sides of the bank, right, like a lighthouse on the right, attached with that lacy loop to the house itself where the people live, and on the other side, same kind of lacy loop attaching those two houses together. Giant boat. This reminds me of that cargo freighter thing that got stuck in the canal earlier this year, right, or late last year. Not funny story, super awful story, but very large sideways boat. The folk art perspective, which means no regard for perspective, just making things various sizes, really, as the author says, adds to the charm of this piece. Now she goes on to show us a couple more pieces. I want to show you a couple more things that I thought were extraordinary. There's so many extraordinary pieces in this book. Hey, Heather. This for me is one of them. Have you ever been, visited England and gone to, wait, let me frame this out. I'm trying to make it a little bit bigger. And gone to, for example, Anne Hathaway's house, all these beautiful sort of Stratford-on-Avon type Tudor-beamed cottages, so beautiful, so quintessentially English, right? I just love this piece. This is like some kind of cast off or cast away needlepoint in the center that you can see that the author, Mandy, has embroidered onto, right? On the bottom, there's roses on the left, and there's a variety of different wildflowers on the right, gone right over it. This is a great way to deal with old cross-stitch or needlepoint projects that you find in shops that are not finished, maybe not complete. A good way to hide the parts that are missing are to crop it and embroider over bits of it, because then you're saving the handwork that somebody's done. You're embellishing it and adding on to it. And besides that, it's probably a case of the canvas was just bare here, because you can picture that. You see this so often in thrift stores. Hey, Gayla. And around the edge, she's used all kinds of vintage fabrics to just stitch, like patchwork styles, just stitch blocks to frame it out. And what a beautiful sort of symphony this has created. I really feel like that border of mismatched patchwork really, really corresponds color-wise to the embroidered work that she did on the corners. It matches so well, and she's even overlapped a little. It's such a smart way to handle something that is maybe not complete, not exactly to your taste, has issues, maybe is stained or damaged. This is a great way to repurpose, reinvigorate, give a renaissance to a piece that is languishing. Like so many cross stitches that we see. Sometimes, hey Dave, woolies may refer to wool flannel undershirts. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Long johns. My grandfather referred to them as snugglies. That's so funny. The English refer to, they have so many funny words for things. My word of the day that came up today, okay, I got it. My word of the day that came up today, I belong to like all these word clubs where they send me a word of the day, and usually it's such an easy word that I think, what a stupid club this is. You have to have a really low IQ to not know this word. This would be alarming. But sometimes they send funny ones, and they sent one that was like, the word, it's a British word, and the word was quanked, Quanket, and it meant utterly exhausted. And they said it's not used anymore because the word knackered has kind of replaced informally, in informal dialect, the same word, the same sentiment. But it's like, you know, I have been run off my feet today. I dropped both kids off to school. I've did 20 things before breakfast, and I am quanked. And I think it has such good sound to it. But a lot of people responded by saying, yeah, you know, I remember this word because it's an early 20th century word. It's not an ancient word. But it has been replaced by knackered, so people don't typically say it. But the British have so many silly words for everything. and not even going into their rhyming Cockney. My roommate when I was in college in England was from Liverpool, and man, she had so many crazy words. I couldn't keep up with what she meant. My brain was like smoking every day when she would just be talking normally. But quanked, I thought, was a funny one. But I think because they are constantly coming up with words, and they are such sort of language-oriented people, right? The largest language there is English. The hugest amount of words in one language is the one that we're speaking now. But they keep coming up with new words too. And I think this is part of the reason that we have so much confusion, even within our little rug hooking world, because it's a shape-shifting thing, all of these terms. I love this piece though. It's actually called Summer, and it was made in 2019. It's an embroidery tapestry that's gotten, she said, a new lease on life with the addition of applique stitching and a patchwork border. Absolutely, absolutely. And I like how, I don't know if you can see up here, if you can even see my cursor, but in the top left-hand corner, it's a bit unfinished. You know, she's just stitched, very simple stitch. She has made no effort to hide the stitches. I think it looks just absolutely beautiful. I think it's a great idea for repurposing something. And I thought this was a great idea too, because when we talk about frames, a lot of us have these needlepoint frames from doing needlepoint, cross stitch, something else. I'm going to take a quick sip, no slurping, I hope. But this is a neat thing too, because this is a really beautiful fleur d'après Bruegel, something of Stratford. You can see on the top left, Switleys or something of Stratford, the maker. But in any case, this is a needle point that was never realized, never done, never started, and somehow it looks like it might have been separated from its kit. You can see on the top right, there are some suggestions of what looks like Persian wool for placement. It's a beautiful, very ambitious piece. And if one is not interested in needlework, this is a just gorgeous pre-printed textile, isn't it? And a nice moment in history. Now, these are things also that you constantly see if you're lucky enough to live in a real populated area with a lot of shopping opportunities. You constantly see these unfinished needlepoint canvases, right? And also on eBay, also on Facebook Marketplace. But sometimes they're so beautiful, and if they're not the really expensive brands, they're very inexpensive to snap up. What a great idea, like fixing one, hey Amber, onto this kind of very simple frame, right? That most people don't choose this as their sort of choice for rug hooking or even punch needle. With these round bars, you really need to anchor them in place. It has square knobs, this one though, so this one's different than the ones that I have. You have to somehow secure it pretty well so it doesn't roll as it goes, right? But it's a great idea for framing something. It's an interesting frame, and the author has also included Fleur d'après Bruegel. 2018, she did this piece. She's included some applique work on top of the flowers where those designs are. And she's literally patched on buttons, like little quilt yo-yos, a bit of hand-stitched embroidery right onto that needlepoint canvas. Just some sort of repetition of quilt fabrics. It's absolutely ingenious, isn't it? Because now we're looking at a mixed media collage. Oh, hello, Anita. Good to see you. And you know, I really love this piece. I don't know if you remember, this was years ago. I think I'm going to say this was 12 years ago, because I think it was the year before Teddy was born, so 11, 12 years ago. I remember that I was in London, and I went to one of the big department stores. I forget which one. It could have been Liberty's. No, it wasn't. You know what it was? It was, I think it was Anthropology, the store that we still have now. I think they're still around. And they had this thing going where they had tons of old needle points that were on stretchers, like, you know, for painting, like having ripped the canvas off and put the stretchers up. They had all kinds of old needle points and quilts, vintage textiles that were unique, that were stretched over different kinds of frames. And somebody was stitching over holes and over canvas, other fabrics, like quilting fabric. So for example, they had one that I remember quite well. I mean, these were extraordinarily expensive too, right? I did not have the funds for this at all. But one of them was stretched over a stretcher, and you could see the frame. It was reversed, right? So I was looking at it like in reverse. It was a weird way of framing, and I thought, looks very unfinished to me. But it was very cool and hip because of that kind of store, isn't it? And they had like a canvas or a needlepoint of a sailing ship, and they had only applied applique like plaid wool, like almost like madras, like shorts material kind of thing, to the sails of the ships. And the rest of it was just the way that the background was. It was, I think, a needlepoint. Because I remember thinking, that's really clever. And that would be a very clever thing to do if you had an issue with a hole in a piece or something like that. Just adhering applique pieces to hide it, right? So they were doing that. I'm pretty sure it was Anthropology way back then, like more than a decade ago for sure. And it's this kind of idea that Mandy's getting at when she shows us things like this. She's left much of the background visible, as she should, because this is a masterpiece of printing. This is part of textile history, looking at these old textiles that have been pre-printed onto canvas, right? Whether someone used it or not, it still benefits us because we're looking at something beautiful that has now been made more beautiful because she has applied a little bit more interest, buttons, textiles, mixed media onto it. I think that's just an extraordinary piece. Speaking of extraordinary pieces, this is also a sort of mixed media installation piece of art. This is by Stina Wickander, 2013. It's just called Vacuum Cleaner. If you can see, this is a vacuum cleaner that's been covered with needlepoint, like finished needlepoint panels that have been cut as pattern pieces and sewn onto this old vacuum to make it fit. Even the outlet, the cord and the hose that are in orange are just cotton, but everything else is actually patchworked needlepoint, including the outlet, right, where you plug it in, that little European plug, that is also needlepoint. So just a sort of wacky, far out moment in fine art, right, using remnants of what must be vintage needlepoints. I see a horse running on the side to create this sort of installation, more highbrow piece. Oh, you like that piece, Mom, huh? And Heather says, I am so buying this book. It gives you such great ideas. I know, Heather, you love the mixed media and all the collage stuff, so this is a great book for you. Really cool piece, really different, right? This is typically not my thing, but when I see it, I think, you know, someone's doing something different. That's great. It's a bit humorous and fun, right? And it kind of combines the idea, if we want to get really crazy and analyze something like this, the idea of housework with the idea of having the free time to do needlepoint, right? It's like a worlds colliding, because someone who spends all day doing housework does not have the time to do that much needlepoint. It's kind of a contradiction in terms, isn't it? A weird kind of visual oxymoron. But I thought super interesting. And if you liked that, you are certainly going to love this. Right, same idea. I think probably, yeah, same artist again, Stina Wickander, Iron Lady, 2006, mixed media. But again, she's using that orange, different color orange, a little bit of rickrack, braid, like sort of braid. It's not actually braid, but that's what people call it, on the outlet of this one. But she has mounted a finished embroidered, needle pointed piece right onto the iron. You can see there's rickrack on the sides of the iron as well. Really beautiful, a real statement piece, isn't it? I like the idea of combining the idea of housework with work that you do, you know, with your hands for pleasure. I think that's super, super interesting. And it actually has something about her. Stina is an artist based in Stockholm, Sweden. For many years, she's collected cross-stitch and needlepoint embroidery from flea markets and vintage shops. She gives these often kitsch and whimsical pieces, which are sewn by women in domestic settings, a new life by covering and combining them with other discarded objects from the home. For example, I'm going to come back to you for a minute. Also, an electric mixer, a telephone, a vacuum cleaner, all transformed by the application of the surface textile. And once dressed up, we view the objects as art pieces rather than utilitarian products. With their colorful skins, the objects can no longer fulfill the purpose, but they have been given a new life. They're now a thing of beauty, right? How cool is that? Isn't that interesting? I know, Nancy, right? Isn't that so neat? So there's all kinds of things at the end, and as usual, I'm not showing you most of them because I don't want to spoil the book if you are ordering it or if you had ordered it. But this book is so strong on combining all different kinds of fiber art, mostly quilting, applique, needlepoint, cross stitch, and with a huge emphasis on repurposing, reusing, and saving vintage pieces that are incomplete or damaged in contemporary pieces by creating sort of a fusion of techniques. This is really cool. I want to show you this one too. It's a handkerchief. Let me get rid of this. I hope you can see the top and bottom well. Handkerchief art. I think this is really beautiful. So she says, handkerchiefs, this is Mandy Pattullo, handkerchiefs are not so commonly used or carried now that we can access, obviously tissues and paper towels and things like that. They were usually given as gifts at Christmas, often in multiples packed in flat in decorative boxes. That was my grandmother's job in Warren, Rhode Island, was packing handkerchiefs into boxes. Most people had cotton hankies with plain white for men and for women printed. Prints, scenes, plain colors, all different things, machine stitched, lace edged, all kinds of combos. They are usually a vintage item that are hard to find a new use for because the cloth itself was usually very fine, particularly when it was washed a lot. So any stitch work you might apply needs to be worked with the handkerchief pulled tight on an embroidery hoop. And she goes on to say what the sort of problematic aspects of that are. So she has done a handkerchief based on this hill farm in Norfolk. It's a naive painting that she had. She said she was born there, as was her mother, and the garden, which was mostly annual flowers, grows from seed. That was my grandmother's pride and joy. I have used a handkerchief in this instance as both a foundation fabric and a framing device. If you are making a portrait of your home or place that you are fond of, you can follow the following steps. And she gives you really in-depth steps for making a handkerchief portrait out of, for example, in this case, a house. So this is the family home for them, and really beautiful. If you can see the handkerchief itself, she's done kind of a ghostly outline on it, right? Just in black, like a little bit of black work embroidery, but she has added in long stitches, long stitch, for the garden. All that green is done in long stitch. And then she has appliqued flowers, full flowers, right? They're not embroidered, that she has cut out of quilt fabrics, right? She's cut out whole flowers and applied those. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, she kept that embroidered blue flower with the sort of swag coming out of it that is part of the original handkerchief. So this is an old handkerchief that she has added a portrait of her family home to. I think this is just an absolutely beautiful idea and a good idea to use like a little handkerchief, right? Another example from her, same kind of thing. This is more of a, I think in England, what they would call a terrace house. Beautiful, again, black and white, and she's just added panels and kind of little snatches of color onto the handkerchief, cut right from original quilting fabrics and what looks like vintage prints too. So I think that is really, really beautiful. Another great idea. Now, have a look at this. This, I think, is just outstandingly beautiful. This is a cross stitch, right? So the cross stitch part of the soldier was completed, but the background was just white. So I know from looking at eBay years ago, sometimes you get either cross stitch or needlepoint patterns that have been made elsewhere, right? That go back to the middle 20th century, that have been made elsewhere or machine made, and only, for example, the petit point, the small stitched center of it is done and the rest of it is blank. And the idea was that you would buy it that way and you would fill in the background with colors or patterns that complemented your existing decor. So this happened a lot. This is a common find. So in this case, it's a soldier and the background was blank. And what she did was she hand painted the background with paints, right? The red, the blue. The colors came out a little bit weird. Let me show you the colors I'm actually seeing because it's a bit more dynamic than my photograph. Let me bring it in here. Right, so you can see she's done a lot of painting in the background, and then really appropriately, I'll come back to this one, she's appliqued, these are two different ones. That's the problem. She's got two of these and I'm showing you the wrong one. I should have had a V8. So in this case, she's got the soldier and she's got these sort of patriotic swatch colors, vintage materials, and a full block there, as you can see, that she's applied to the background. That explains it. But isn't it, you can understand why I would do that, right? Because this is quite similar. So this is on the next page, quite similar. But you can see she's got a pair going. It'd be really lovely to put together a whole series if you were lucky enough to find a pair or more of a cross stitch like this that somebody had started. So she gave them different color schemes, but both really extraordinary and beautiful. Great ideas in this book. I'm going to come back to you here. Lots at the end, if you're interested in clothing design, lots of applique ideas with vintage fabrics onto modern clothing. And it's not corny in the least. Absolutely beautiful ideas. Really, really, oh God, I have to show you this. Collars, look at this. This is like proper art, gallery stuff. She's cut the collars off shirts and she stitched in text, right, that she added for whatever purpose. She's just taken the collars off. Isn't that cool? Wouldn't that be great for a little shadow box or something? What a neat idea. Talk about saving every last little bit, right? I think I showed you this one the other day with the pocket, because we started talking about the idea of pockets. Just lifting a pocket off of a garment, putting it onto a wool applique background, and then adding, in this case, she cut flowers almost like that mosaic chintz, right? When people cut up chintz plates and turn it into mosaic or jewelry. She did that with a very pretty vintage print, just cut flowers out of each and connected all the flowers into this pocket bouquet with simple embroidery stitch, just a running stitch. So as easy as can be, right? She's got a lot of great ideas. Actually, that whole chapter is about pockets. But lots of interesting things going on. And she's also kind of reupholstering stuff using vintage fabrics. So I found the soldier at the end. But this really is a fantastic book. Lots of different techniques in it. And it's really endless, right? Because it's so diverse. It's so varied. So many different techniques. My mom says, Graham would have loved to see the handkerchief. She worked in the handkerchief factory since she was 14 years old and loved it. Hard physical work. I bet it was hard physical work. Oh man, can you imagine? So creative. Good to see you. Joan, that's you, isn't it? Midnight Hazel. I think so. So I'm going to do a little bit more this morning because I want to transition from the Mandy Pattullo book. I pulled, when I was running this segment on applique, I pulled a bunch of applique books and quilt books, because I wanted to kind of see this through in my mind and see what possibilities were for doing mixed media and introducing mixed media, as we saw, for example, in the Anne-Marie Littenberg books on the hooked landscape and the hooked portraits. She often does things where she applies other textiles, for example, quilting cotton, into the background and then hooks around them. So creating multimedia fiber art and combining an element of rug hooking or rug punching with other textiles. That's why I went to these other books in the first place, because I thought this is really smart. You know, before I forget, let me show you two other images from Mandy. Oh, Mandy. That I pulled from her website that was that she'd already sold. So they're not there anymore, but these are just squares that she had done onto sort of her own applique designs and embroidery onto log cabin orphaned blocks, right, Relda? I am so sorry, Relda. I am so sorry. Good to see you, though. Good to see you. Now I'm going to be thinking, what's Joan? What's Joan? Sometimes it's hard to remember. My brain is going. But this is a Mandy Pattullo original on an orphaned quilt block. So if you have any of these that you've picked up at flea markets or whatever, and you're thinking what to do with them, well, you can applique onto them like this. I think this is just an extraordinary piece. I absolutely love it. It broke my heart that both of these pieces were sold. So ideas for orphaned blocks, right? You know, I have some of these orphaned log cabin blocks and different kinds of quilting blocks, and I have always had a struggle with, well, what do I do with them? Should I put them together? Some of them, you know, block sets are often hand sewn and they're not exactly the same size. So I know if I do want to put them together for like a hanging quilt, that there could be a thing with having to adjust size, right? Because the hand stitching wasn't always as perfect as machine stitching, and then when there's a discrepancy, it's a lot of fooling and fiddling. So I tend to just hold on to orphan blocks and wonder what to do with them. That's the perfect thing to do with them. So when I got into this chapter and I was thinking about this subject, I pulled all my older applique books. And I have dozens and dozens of books on applique. And applique was very, very big in the 1970s. You probably remember that or know that just instinctively. It was huge. Quilting was huge. But when quilting had this huge renaissance, applique was just pushing it one step further in terms of creativity and imagination. Besides using a pieced pattern, like for a quilt block, a lot of people were very interested in doing original designs as applique designs that were not pieced, right? And a lot of books came out on this subject. And I have to say, I've been looking through quite a few of them for content for this show. And this is one of the ones that I pulled recently. So I have to say, this is a mostly black and white book. This is called Pictures in Patchwork by Marie Janine Solvit, S-O-L-V-I-T. Photographs by Elle, E-L-L-E, one named person like Madonna. So this is not one that I have in the photos that we're going to look at. We're going to run over into tomorrow too with this. But really interesting ideas in this book, very simple patchwork and applique ideas that cross very easily design-wise into hooking or making a multimedia piece that includes hooking and other elements. So for example, when I saw this tree, the first thing I thought of was, wouldn't that be great as Pradi? To do this kind of a composition, but to use a Pradi tree. Now she has done like three-dimensional little quilt pieces to make the leaves, and it has a great three-dimensional feel on a very beautiful and busy landscape. But what a great simple idea, and for us, this translates as Pradi. So Heather, that fast, huh? I really got into this book, and I was looking at some of the pictures in here. Again, it's mostly black and white, but sometimes with books of this period, as you know if you also collect them, you get a lot of really dated design, and it's not like it's corny, it's just so much of one thing, right? Because we went from that MCM period right through the 60s, 70s, and 60s was pretty solid for design, 70s a little bit less. It was almost like that psychedelic summer of love style of pop art was really invisible transition. And for me, 70s is one of the hardest periods of design to pinpoint and pull motifs out of because it was very fragmented. It wasn't cohesive as a style for me. So sometimes craft books from this period have that same sort of 1 foot on the solid ground of design and the other on a banana peel feel to them. But this book is an exception because I really struggled with finding images in my other books that are 70s era books to say, wow, there's so many nice patterns and ideas in this book. The others I had a problem with. This book was the exception. For me, this was the standout of that era, and I think I probably own all of the patchwork and applique books from the 1970s. This is my favorite. Let's look at some of the designs that come out of this book. And again, this is called Pictures in Patchwork by Marie Janine Solvit. So let's come back over here, and I'm going to go for like another 5 or 10 minutes. Let's look at some of these and get some fire going. Oops, wait a minute. I got to get rid of that first, don't I? You still got Mandy's horse. Oh, Mandy. And we're going to come down here to this one, I hope. There we go. You know, I just think this is such a pretty piece. How great is this as a design, right? I really love it. To me, this is more rug hooking than it is applique. They've used all solid colors except for that tree, right, that has like the print of the roses. Really smart. Dave says 1970s were chunky and clunky. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we'd moved away from the kind of pixelated pop art of the 60s, and we were moving toward really chunky shapes, heavy, unbalanced, for me unbalanced. But this piece I really like because it does sort of speak to that appeal for shape-driven composition. The sun has that exaggerated halo on it, which is certainly one of the motifs of the 1970s. The gingerbread style house, right, it's not really, it's just a colonial house, but with the individual scallops picked out, it does have that gingerbread Hansel and Gretel kind of a look. I love this. I love the folk art perspective that is completely out of whack in terms of proportion. No perspective, no proportion, but all of this sort of build up on the side, this green hillside that's made from, like Dave said, these clunky pieces, right? Just different greens. Smart. Clunky tree trunks. I mean, it's just a neat piece. They've got some good things going on with overlap, right? Like layers, because you want layers of interest even in folk art. You don't want everything to be perfectly flat and there on a silver platter for you. So they've got a cloud overlapping just a little bit, that giant oversized sun. And they've got the trees kind of overlapping the house a little bit. There is a bit of a chaotic feel to it, which I like. And I think For me, the proportions are a little bit off because we got a very solid, stable sky in terms of patterning, and I kind of wish there was more of a stable bottom to balance it out. I'd like there to be a little more stability on the bottom of the composition. I love everything that's in here. I just wish it was a few inches longer at the bottom to see some more solid shapes to really ground that bar of busyness in the middle. But I love the candy feel to it. I love the little flower pot in the window upstairs. I love the mixy multi applique bushes. If you see on the far left that cut off tree, that little blue tree, there's like lame, satin, little bits of calico, cut out of each of these leaves. She's got small scale prints. She's got medium scale. She's got large scale prints. She's got a real mixture of fabrics going on. This piece is called The Charming Country Landscape in Bloom. It's 3 feet by 3 feet, and it was made by Beatrice Robelot, Robelot. It is a beautiful piece. It's actually easier to look at in the book, I think. It has more balance, but I absolutely love it. I'm super, super inspired by this piece. I love the quilt feel, that patchwork field of the hillside on the right, and I love the multiples of trees with those really clunky tree trunks. It's always nice to have a nice primitive style house and that inviting path leading up to it. I think this is just a stellar, stellar piece. And in terms of composition, it's the very kind of thing that we look at when we look at rug hooking compositions. This is another beauty. This one made by Jeanne, Geanne, Wallard, Wallard. Softly colored cotton prints in solid, simple design, does not have a title, but a beautiful simple design, quite busy. It doesn't have the measurements either, but it must be quite large because there's someone fishing off of the bridge. There's a child on the bridge. There's a car and a person on the bridge. Very folk art feel again, a cluster, a real concentration of turreted houses, townhouses, a bit of a castle feel to it, using all different kinds of prints, a little very out of proportion sort of tug-looking boat in the water, clouds colliding in the sky, that nice orange sky, beautiful coral, orange, purple palette, right, with a little bit of white and green and lilac. Really, really smart opposites, right, opposites on the color wheel. Kind of a palette. I think this is just a brilliant piece. It has an Eastern European feel to it. I think part of that might be the shaping of the houses, but you can see that this is represented as, for example, a city block. It's not like it's cropped and we're not seeing the attached houses on the right and left. There's a cluster, and that's what we're seeing. This piece frames this really whimsical and impossible collection of buildings. Little trees sticking out here and there in black silhouette. Super, super, super smart. Some things done not in the folk art style, like real care taken to the shadow under the bridges, right? Showing you that gray shadow along with where the light is shining on the front of the bridge. There are some little tips to different styles of art in here, little nods to different styles. But in general, this is just a really classic and solid folk art piece using, going back to last night's episode, that limited color palette. This is really duochromatic in purples and oranges, right? There really aren't enough of any other color to make it a full color piece. So I thought this was an interesting pick because we were just talking about this last night. And I think in terms of being inspired and putting together a composition, what a great idea. Do you remember in last night's episode when Donna Harkman was saying in the book, you know, what is your source? Collection of houses, right? In this case, there's a bridge, maybe it's a meaningful bridge, and there's a bunch of collected houses that certainly do not go together in real life. And there they are as part of the composition, just cobbled together, right? And then what color do you want? The book was about monochromatic rugs, but if you remember at the end, there were 2 duochromatic rugs. And one of the rugs was the suffragette rug that was done in purples and yellows. So that's quite similar in palette to this one. Hello, Cindy. That's okay. But interesting because, again, it's bringing you through. Remember, we said last night, the same process where you say, well, what are my sources? If I'm designing my own pattern, what do I want to put in it? I want to put a bunch of houses from my old neighborhood. I want to put a bunch of houses from my favorite cities, all different cities. I'm going to put them on the same block and I'm going to cobble them together. And then what colors do you want? You want to go full blast rainbow, full palette, no rules? Or do you want to think about monochromatic, duochromatic? was going to say achromatic, but I think that's so difficult. That's definitely not for everybody. That's really, really difficult. No color at all. So like an all white piece. But you do see that in whole piece quilts, right, where you get one color and often white, and it's the quilting that makes the design with almost a trapunto relief to it. Very, very difficult, right? Not a beginner skill to walk into and expect a great result. Super complicated thought process going into the more colors you remove, obviously, the more thought you need to give to the composition. But I thought that was a great example of what we were talking about last night. Let's look at maybe one more, and then I'm going to get going. This book is The Gift That Keeps on Giving, so we'll pick this up where we leave off tomorrow, but I think the compositions in here are well worth looking at and talking about. This is such a sweet piece, and I have seen a lot of contemporary pieces with this kind of super, super unrealistic, whimsical tree house motif, right? Sharon Smith was the first one that springs to mind. I'll show her piece in just a minute, but I absolutely love this design. The ripening fruits on this creative applique tree are really houses. This work by Bernard Donay, D-O-N-A-Y, measures about 40 inches by 50 inches. Super simple color palette. Let me just tell you, this book came out in 1972, so the year I was born. You know, so just to sort of give you bookmarks in terms of, this was reprinted many times also, but just to give you a feel for when this piece was created, what that era of design was. I absolutely love this. It's, you know, it's repetition, it's multiples, it's what we always talk about, not just of leaves, but of houses. And you're seeing multiple houses, which makes it a very, very stable composition. Your eye looks, it sees the tree houses, it gets the joke. We're seeing a repeat of houses, we're seeing a repeat of color, but the houses are very different, right? This could be your village. This could be the village green if you're lucky enough to live in a beautiful little town with a village green. Maybe these are all of the houses that make up the village green, and there they are in the tree, rooted like a little tree house. How cool. Using plaid, it looks like plaid wool, possibly madras on the tree trunk that matches the leaves. The artist has really gone out of his way to keep the color palette simple, but keep the tree trunk in the background, one color palette, and that's like the blues and the greens, in contrast to the reds that make up the house. And there's a couple of pink houses, but in general, red and blacks, right? Really smart and interesting composition, something that has legs for sure. And it made me think of Sharon Smith's piece, very, very different, but the idea of putting in a really outsized house that would never fit into a tree. It's funny. There's a joke there right away, isn't there? It has a sort of whimsy and playfulness that is just super memorable. As soon as I saw that piece in the book, I thought, I know Sharon Smith has done that. She's done that with other compositions too. But what a great idea. So there is nothing new under the sun, according to the Bible, right? Because that's a biblical quote. There is nothing new under the sun. You're just looking at these old books, getting some ideas, getting some inspiration. It's still early in 2022, very early, thinking about designs that you might want to do this year, or things you might want to evolve in your head. Looking at these books is a great way to synthesize, come up with new ideas, get clarity, get out that tracing paper like Donna does, like I love to do, just trace over and over and over the same things, putting in elements, taking out elements, synthesizing your piece to be exactly the way that you want it. One thing that these 1970s era books are great for, it's ideas, right? Sometimes for me the colors are not right on, there's not enough of a color palette to please me, and sometimes if it is that groovy Brady Bunch palette, it's not really doesn't hit me in the sweet spot anyway. So sometimes that's off, but at least you can look at the designs. Maybe that's the benefit of looking at a lot of black and white images, because you're not biased or thrown by color choices that are maybe not your faves. So you can, in your mind, imagine a different color palette, and that's helpful too. So interesting. I want to pick this back up tomorrow and look at some of the other designs in it, because as I say, I think this school of design, 1970s era applique and patchwork, really lends itself to designing any kind of a rug design. I could easily see this kind of simple composition also being an all proddy rug, right? Certainly the tree being proddy, but the whole thing being proddy, right? You could really easily make a tree with all of those long proddy ends as simple as this, as colorful as this, and it would be such an interesting composition, including the little shelves of color, the little hills in the background. That would be perfectly possible in a style as sort of pixelated and rough as Prati is, right, with the finished product. So many ideas, so many possibilities, so many crossovers, so many opportunities. Where things cross over, that makes gaps, like a weave, right? That's where we're thinking, in between those little gaps, thinking how to put things together. So Amber, family tree, that's a great idea, Amber. That's a great idea. Using an actual tree like that to get that kind of joke, that folk art motif, right? The tree, what's more folk art than a solid old tree? And putting in the houses of your family or houses that you've lived in, that's a great idea. What a special piece that would be too. And that links up to what we were talking about last night with Donna Harkman's book. That she, she's so focused on, in her designing, she's so focused on what does every element of it mean. It needs to mean something to me. I work less like that, I have to admit, because I'm in a business setting and I'm always looking to make patterns that please you too. So I'm not always thinking about whether it resonates 100% with me, because that's not always the object for me. But for you, if you're not making rug hooking designs to sell and it's not your business, it is a great place to start thinking, how can I make every element of this composition be something that means something to me? Because the more of those sort of devices I put into the composition, the more it's going to include. It's like a collection of things that are important and dear to me. It's going to be that much more meaningful to you as a finished product. It's a great starting point, isn't it? A great starting point. So that's a great idea, Amber. I love that. Yes, please thumbs up on these videos. And I will see you tomorrow for coffee time at Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. We will look one more time we will conclude the idea of patchwork and applique tomorrow on tomorrow's episode, and I will remind you about bingo, because bingo is this coming Friday night. Make sure that you get your cards ready. We haven't had a bingo night for a long time, and it should be a big blowout. Spring-themed bingo coming up. And if you are not on Facebook and you don't feel like going over to ribboncandyhooking.com, remember that free pattern is still there from Valentine's Day yesterday. Right, the pattern I worked out yesterday. That's up there too on Ribbon Candy Hooking. But I will, as soon as I log off in 2 seconds, post the link to the bingo cards in this video. So you can click on there, get your bingo cards, and just make sure you have them printed by 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday night. But in the meantime, I will see you tomorrow for coffee time at